boring quests. And I'm talking about, in sci-fi games, you always have to power something up, right? You have to power up an elevator, you have to power up a gondola, you have to power up a door. You know, instead of finding some creative solution to get around a problem, you're always having to find a way to power something up. And you have to do this like a million times per level, or per game. In fantasy games, the equivalent is when you have to go kill an arbitrary number of something. Oh, wolves are bothering the village, so you have to go kill 7 of them. You don't have to go kill 8 of them, or 6 of them. You have to kill 7 of them. Or if you don't have to kill them, you have to collect their hides, right? But you don't have to collect 6 hides, or 8 hides. You have to collect 7 hides. What's up with this random arbitrary number? If there's 8 wolves, shouldn't I kill all 8? What if there's only 6 wolves? I mean, if I'm killing all the wolves that are bothering the village, shouldn't that be enough? No. No, it's got to be 7. Arbitrary numbers in fantasy games, and then these power-up quests in sci-fi games. Power it up. Now, you can't use your grenade to blow up the door, because doors are immune to grenades and rocket launchers. You can go power it up. My next biggest problem is static worlds, or factions or faction leaders. But static worlds, like in World of Warcraft, we've been rebuilding Orgrimmar for like 3 years. 3 years. That's like decades in game time. And they work day and night. You know, I log in at 2 in the morning, they're working away. I log in at 5 in the afternoon, they're working away. There's never a time when I log in and they're not working away. There's no talk of like budget cuts or anything like that, or any even talk of like when it might be done. No, we're just going to continually, perpetually build the same few buildings in Orgrimmar for decades of game time. The worlds don't change enough. Even in games like Fallout New Vegas and stuff like that, like, what if I want to go kill the town? Like, what if I go and obliterate the town, shouldn't it, like, decay and stuff? Okay, so the worlds, like, they almost never change. And the factions, like, why are they so static? Why are the factions never changing? I mean, if you look at, like, in the real world, right? Like, in America we have, you know, the Democratic and the Republican Party. Those sides have, like, changed over the past 100 years, right? They've, like, basically flipped sides. That's really interesting. Why can't we have stuff like that in games, right? Why can't the factions change around? Why can't the factions evolve over the course of the game? They never do, right? They're all static, very boring. And same thing with their leaders, right? Like, no matter how important you are to the game's storyline, faction leaders rarely ever change. There's very rarely a game where something happens that's outside of your control that causes, like, maybe you like the faction leader and then it changes, and then maybe that would cause you to want to change factions, and it would make the world interesting, and it would give that immersion that is lacking whenever the world never changes, the factions never change, and the leaders never change. This ties into my previous point, the lack of political intrigue within games. In the real world, factions are never whole. Not everybody is on the same page. We have, you know, the Tea Party within the Republicans that are extremists. We have PETA in the Democrats. Not all Democrats agree with PETA, and not all Republicans agree with the Tea Party. And all these different sub-factions are kind of vying for the leadership of the whole faction. We have people within factions that don't quite agree with the leadership, but agree with the core principles. We have people that agree with the core principles, but not with the leadership. We should have these things in-game. We should have political intrigue, people trying to influence people, leaders making calls that they don't necessarily feel is the right call because they've been convinced that it is for the greater good. Things like this. You know, we should have the ability to have NPCs cross factions without any form of player involvement whatsoever. Things like that should just happen. If Azeroth were a real place, you don't think a single human would sympathize with the Horde? You don't think a single orc would sympathize with the Alliance? These things should just happen, and it would flesh out the world and make it a much more enjoyable experience. Over-narrating the story. I do not like it when games do this at all. It really detracts from my immersion in the game, and it really detracts from the entire story itself. If you're going to provide me subtle hints, don't explain them to me 5 minutes later. If you're going to tell a story, try to do it without actually just coming out and saying, well, those guys are bad guys, and we're good guys, so we're killing them. Tell me a story. Like, maybe my character we'll find out what's going on, and maybe I won't catch on to it quick enough, and that's fine. That's fine. Maybe there's points of confusion in the game where I don't have, in Bioshock Infinite, Elizabeth telling me, like, oh, well, that stuff's all really bad, and, these guys are really bad. Like, I don't need you to tell me that every 5 minutes. I don't need you to tell me how I should react to your game, and I don't need you to over-narrate the story, telling me every little point. Leave something to the imagination. Leave something for me to figure out. Leave something for me to go through on a second playthrough and be like, oh wow, I missed that the first time because I didn't really know exactly what was going on. Instead of just telling me straight up from the beginning, oh, yeah, by the way, this is what's going on. And then 5 minutes later, you're going to tell me again. Like, please don't do that. Please don't over-narrate the story. And please don't tell me how I'm feeling about things or whenever things are bad. I don't need anybody in the game to tell me when things are bad. You know what it does? Is it subtracts from the level of bad. Like, when something bad happens, and then when the NPC tells me that was bad, I'm just like, oh really? Thanks. I guess I don't need to play the game anymore because I've already got everything figured out because you just told me. I don't like it when games scale monsters up. As my character levels up, I should become more and more powerful to the point where everything in the game is trivial. You might think, well, that makes it easy. Well, no, because I've been playing the game for like 20, 30, 40 hours. Oblivion's the best example of this, although they did fix it in Skyrim. So in Oblivion, when your character was level 1, and you go fight a pack of bandits, they're also level 1. And whenever your character is level 10, the bandits are also level 10. Whenever you've got the best armor in the game, those bandits will also somehow have the best armor in the game. Now, like I said, they fixed that in Skyrim, but in Skyrim you have a different problem, right? Like, people will go try to hunt you down. Well, in Skyrim, I've killed like 120 dragons. I'm like the only person in the universe that can kill 120 dragons. And you're gonna come hunt me down? You're gonna put me in jail? Like, no. That's not quite monster scaling. It's like more the reverse. Like, the world didn't scale in comparison to my character. In MMOs, the problem's a little bit different, right? In World of Warcraft, we get Mist of Pandaria, and I come in at level 85, having killed the Destroyer of Worlds, the most powerful dragon that's ever been known to exist, ever, forever, infinite loops and stuff like that. I've killed this dude. I'm a beast. And then I'm gonna go and I can't go kill like 10 panthers at the same time. Or I'm gonna go have trouble with like these little guys that are bugging some panda bears. Like, if the panda bears are having trouble dealing with something, well, I should have no problem just wiping them all out because I've killed the most powerful dragon ever in existence. He was going to destroy the entire world, and I destroyed him. These panthers and these, like, I forget what they're called, but like all the enemies, when you're questing up, should not be that powerful in comparison to me. I saved the world. Like, I'm Savior of Azeroth. Oops. Literally, like, it says right next to my name that I am the Savior of Azeroth. And yet these guys are going to come and attack me. Especially, like, when they attack me one at a time. Like, get real. Come on. I'm a badass. And the game shouldn't take that away from me. A game should never make me a badass and then take it away from me. Find more creative solutions than just making the monsters more powerful. And especially, going back to Skyrim, whenever I am the Dragon Slayer, I am the Dragon Reborn. That makes me like part dragon. I eat their souls. And guys are going to come and attack me one or two at a time. Like I walk into a city and they're like, oh man, it's the Dragon Reborn. Everybody cower in fear and respect of my awesome pixelated character. But the bandits, like, I guess they've never heard of that. Like, they should just forfeit when I walk into their camp, They should try to, like, convince me, like, hey, we're not bad guys, we don't believe in the whole political system, and we're trying to live our own life of peace. If we bothered somebody, dude, sorry, we'll stop it. They shouldn't shoot a bow at me just because I came too close. I mean, I'm sure they've heard of me. If everybody in every city that I've ever been to has heard of me, I'm sure those bandits have heard of me, too. So, scale the world with my character, and don't scale the monsters up to be just as powerful as I am. Because when I've invested that much time into your game, I deserve that payoff. As a counterpoint to that, people might say, well, excuse me, if they, allow you to be a badass and then never take it away from you, all the challenge and, fun parts of the game are taken away. But no, bring some more creativity to it, Make it to where there's a faction that's actively out to get me, and they do so in a creative way. And maybe they find a way to strip my power, right? DC Comics has been having a problem with this with Superman for ever, right? For decades. And they find ways to either, limit Superman's power in a certain situation with kryptonite or something like that. Come up with creative solutions. It shouldn't be all the same thing over and over again, game after game after game. Oh, well, as you level up, you're just fighting harder enemies. Because that's not the way the world works. I know there's no such thing as a super soldier in the real world, but just imagine if you really were, right? You were Jason Bourne in the real world. It doesn't matter how many different countries you'd go to, you'd always be the super soldier, you'd always be the badass, right? So you'd have to come up with more creative solutions. Maybe they start training their own super soldiers, and then you have to fight the super soldiers. Not I've been fighting the same enemy since I first logged into the game, and now just for some reason he's more powerful. That doesn't make any sense. Or now some reason he's just hurting me more than he used to. For some reason now I just do less damage to him than I used to. No, either increase the amount of enemies that come after you, because after all, if you become a prominent figure in the world, then yeah, more people are going to have to team up to take you on, and that's fine. And it'll make the gameplay actually evolve. It'll make the game itself evolve, and it'll make me evolve as a player. And you can do that in a challenging and fun way. Tell a good story. Now, millions of dollars go into developing a video game. And a lot of times the story is just horrible. And this happens in movies too, but we're talking about video games. So the worst recent culprit is Diablo 3. Millions of dollars spent in production, and the story was just horrendous and inconclusive, and didn't even tie into the world of Sanctuary that previously existed. Why is this? Why can you spend millions of dollars developing a video game and can't give us a good story? And a lot of the times, it's just asinine, because as in the case of Diablo 3, several fans made huge posts on the forums about how the story could have been improved, and that Blizzard could use that stuff for free. And in fact, of a beloved game franchise like Diablo, I'm not saying I could create a good story for the game, but I sure would have done it, and I probably would have done it for free, or for very low payment. I don't know who wrote the story, I'm not that concerned with it, or, how much they got paid to do it, but it was horrible, and there's no reason to spend millions of dollars on something and not at least give it a good story. Not when there's so much good, narrative out there, and, people willing to do that kind of work. Now, not everybody plays a video game for the story, or even cares if there's a story at all, but the bottom line is that if you're going to spend $1 million in producing a video game, you might as well have a really good story, especially in the case of games like Diablo 3, huge production value. And you skimp on a good story? I don't understand that at all. You could have skimped in so many other areas. You could have just written a better story. It really bothers me in movies too, and I'm just going to go off for just a second here. Millions of dollars go into the production of movies, and nobody stops to say this story sucks. And if you don't play video games for the story, that's completely fine. But it doesn't hurt to have a good story.